Okay, we got another episode of Hunt Suburbia, sitting here with Chris Alberini.
How you doing?
Good, another awesome year.
Yeah, having a good time this year, so can't complain.
So I think the last time people saw you on the podcast was after you killed the big one. We scored it in my garage, the
Yep.
195. And on the way back over here, I was like, what did you get last year again? So what'd you do last season after you killed that big one? Then we'll get into your two awesome bucks you got this year already. But
Yeah, so going into last year, I was still like riding the high of that and killing that big one, and I went into it saying I was going to focus on the kids and try not to go crazy and chase any bucks, just because it was, and like you were along for that ride, like I put so much time into hunting that deer and all day sits, and it wore me out. So I went into the year last year like I'm not going to do much. So I think the whole year I think I sat maybe 5 times.
Yeah.
I mean, not counting the times I sat with my kids. But yeah, sat 5 times. I killed one doe. Didn't even shoot at a buck. My kids both got deer, so that was good.
Yeah.
I got them to fill their tags. But yeah, then going into this year, I was like, all right, this year now I'm gonna put some time in again.
now that you got the bug back again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like the huge deer hangover, because Pat Burns talked about it too after he killed Electric Buck. I think that next year he didn't hunt very much either. It's like, you can, I mean, but most people just like, you know what? That wore him out. That was like a 6-year chase, and might as well just like focus on something else rather than trying to get a giant, right? Because it's hard to repeat it.
Yeah, and you're not going to beat it when you kill a buck that big. You're not going to beat it.
Yeah.
So anything else, even if it's a good deer, is going to be a letdown.
Yeah.
So it was, and it was, like I said, it was mentally taxing. Like you said, Pat had a 6-year chase with it, but when I focused on that deer and was doing all day sits, and then when I missed it and coming back after that, like I was depressed, and then when it was all over, it was like thank God.
Yeah.
Like, take a breath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's but so you're not going to beat that one probably around, I mean, 195 inch rack wise, but you got your heaviest buck this year, didn't you?
Yeah. So, and that was a freak thing, because usually, as you know, and some other people know, like I'm big into the hunting dogs, and I try to focus on my hunting dogs for all October. So I usually don't even plan to hunt deer in October. I spend all year like training the dogs just for bird season. So,
I remember you telling me you weren't going to hunt till November.
Yeah. And actually, so what happened is I had cameras up. It was a spot that I've been hunting for 22 years. I've had permission there. I had cameras up and had a couple nice bucks on camera, but random, nothing that was solid. The buck that I actually killed, I had, but the pictures of him, like I knew he was a shooter, but I didn't think he was as big as he was. Like on the pictures didn't show like his body size, but I knew it was a deer I'd want to shoot. And then the morning that I killed him, that morning I got a picture of him and another buck going to bedding. And still, like I was packing for a trip to go up into New Hampshire with the dogs. I was guiding for the Dartmouth college kids up there. Didn't think I'd have time to hunt. So I, even though I made note of it, like, oh, he's going into that bedding area, he's probably going to stay there all day. I didn't think much of it. Well, I ended up getting packed. The kids were all busy out doing stuff. My wife had a medical procedure that day, so she was like taking a nap after we got her home. So I was like, I got done packing, and I was like, I guess I'll go hunting. So I grabbed the saddle stuff and went hunting, and then actually was very surprised because the place was full of does, and that's it. I didn't see any does, not one. And actually, no, that's not right. I saw one doe, but going the opposite way. Like she was coming from open hardwoods going into bedding.
Yeah, you remember you texted me that too, and you're like, this is odd. Like,
yeah,
because I think you were in there maybe a few days earlier, maybe it was after, and you're like, there's just so much action. They're going back and forth.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't seen anything.
It was the one deer, and like I said, she was going into bedding, and I was like, I don't know, and I had a good wind. I didn't know what was up with it. But yeah, then right coming up to prime time, a pretty decent 8-pointer. I don't know. I don't want to guess on its score, but probably 3.5, maybe 4.5-year-old 8-pointer came out of bedding, but from a different way. And was looking at him and knew I wasn't going to shoot him. And then I saw him turn around. Like he got pretty close to me, turned around and started walking back where he came from. And when I looked behind him, I saw the rack and I was like, oh, that's a big deer. the two of them got probably about 50 yards from me, started like sparring, like very friendly. It wasn't a fight at all. Started sparring, and I was just watching it all. They were in brush. I couldn't shoot at them, even if I had, even if I was going to shoot 50 yards. But right as it was starting to get dark, that little 8-pointer took off, went way up this ridge. And as soon as he went away, like got up the ridge and I couldn't see him anymore, that big buck was still standing there. So just in my saddle, I turned around and grabbed, I have like a little handheld rattle. It's not a bag. It's like the two plastic things you rub together.
Yeah.
And just real soft, tried to copy the sound of what they were doing, and did like one little grunt. It was all like I had it like tucked up to my body to try to muffle it.
Yeah.
Because it was only 50 yards away.
Right.
And sure enough, he started walking, and he was quartering to me, and he walked right up. I think I shot him at, I don't know, maybe 25 yards. And he ran down a hill that was actually going off property, and I heard him fall. I knew. I actually, when I found him, I didn't even blood track him. I just walked to where I found him.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you heard him fall down.
Yeah, I heard him fall, and that's why I didn't even blood track. I just walked that way, and sure enough, there he was. And I couldn't believe the size of his body. Like I said, 230 dressed, and I think the formula that I've read is like you multiply it by.
It's probably 280 or something, or 280.
Yeah, no, it was more. It was like 290. I think you multiply it by 0.1 or something like that. I forget what it is. I looked it up, but that's a big deer.
That's a huge deer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I saw one of those charts the other day. I think I saw 240 was 300 pounds.
Yeah.
If you're 240 on the hoof.
Deer.
Yeah. Monstrous. Something you said there, which I think, for people listening for tips and advice and stuff, is watching the body language of deer, because that can teach you so much about what's around. Like if I just see a doe walking through, I have the binoculars on her the whole time. If she's just feeding, never looking back or anything, all right, there's probably nothing there. But if she's constantly looking back over her like that, over her shoulder, not towards you at all, you just get ready. Yeah. There could be a big buck coming, right? What have you seen in body language?
So the big thing is over the years of, like you said, paying attention to them, is noticing like time frames and when to call, when not to call, or like I've had times where I've called to a deer, watching on the binoculars, and he's totally paying attention to me, but never takes a step towards me.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can, and I think that there's been times in the past where I overcalled that deer and probably made him a little worried about what was going on. Yeah. Like where now, like if I do a call in sequence and I can see a deer like in the binoculars far out and he's looking and then he's not going to come, pretty much give it up. Like stop educating him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only time I've had that happen, where I'll be looking through the binoculars at a buck going by, he's not going to come into range. So I'll give him a couple grunts while still looking. He might stop and look at the grunt and keep going. And the only other way I've been able to get him come is to tinkle the horns together. I keep my horns either hanging on a little rope over my bow hanger, or if I'm in like a climber, I just have them right here so I can reach and grab them real quick. I just tinkle them together, and that will sometimes get them to turn 90 degrees and come down.
Yeah.
It hasn't worked out where I've got them into range because they're still on high alert and they're looking for the bucks that are making that sound. But and the muffling thing is a good thing for beginners out there. If you're pretty close to the deer and you make a loud grunt, they're going to know something's up because they can see everything.
Yeah, and they can pinpoint it too. So it's like, like that's why I tried to muffle it, because if I just called right in front of me, he'd know like, hey, it's 50 yards there and there's no deer there. Yeah. That's why I kind of turned, rubbed it against my body. So like he heard it, but he was like, maybe like, let me look around the corner.
Yeah.
And it worked. So I was pumped that it worked, because he was, from the time I saw him until that, it was probably close to 20 minutes, that he was there and never moved, even when that other buck walked off, and whatever I did got him to move. So.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you got to do that. And sometimes if you have rattling horns, if you bring them with you, and because the thing that you're missing when you're just rattling is all the sound they make on the ground. Yeah. The leaves churning up and stuff. Yeah. So last year I did a lot. I haven't done it this year, but hanging it from your bow rope, hanging the antlers and bouncing them off the ground.
Yeah. I've never done that, but I've heard, and that makes sense. One thing I do is when I'm doing rattling calls and even grunting and stuff, if I'm in a tree where there's branches, like I'll reach up and break a branch.
Yeah.
Like, where it's, where I think when I was newer, I was always like, oh, you want to be quiet. But
me too.
When you think about it, you're like, when you're watching deer run around and grunt and stuff, there's a lot of noise associated with it.
Yep.
You know, it's not just that noise. It's not like they're standing there completely quiet and grunting or fighting each other. There's other noise. So I started doing that. Actually, the other day when I told you, before I killed this buck, when I saw that real nice old deer.
The one bedded?
Yeah, the one that I watched stand up. When I was calling him, I was doing that. I was in an oak tree in my saddle, but I had a pine tree like up butted against me, and I was snapping all kinds of branches.
Yeah.
It didn't work, but but I was trying.
You gotta try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only got one of those where my saddle is set up right now over in the spot with that big Massey 8-pointer I've been sending you videos of. Where that saddle's set up, I've got the same thing. I got a pine tree just 2 or 3 feet off my back when I'm hanging off the tree in the saddle, and it's easy to reach over and not even grab the, break. There's nice live branches that I can just shake and they rattle together, and just use that to make a call. But not every tree you're in, you're going to be able to reach and grab something.
And that is one thing I've been, I really got in, I think 2 years ago when I was hunting that big ones. The first year I used a saddle. I didn't hunt much last year, but I had the saddle. And then this year I think this year every sit has been in the saddle. And one thing that I'm trying to tune in is, picking the right tree. Because I think at first when I started with the saddle, I had too much confidence in the fact that I could hide just behind the tree. And now I'm trying to pick out trees where there's another tree or, next to it or some good back cover. And, it's funny because I think before I told you, like I was so into, when I was in hang on stands, I was so into picking the perfect tree with cover. And then I went to the saddle and like almost forgot about it.
Yeah.
It was like, and then I had to get back into it where I'm trying to pick some back cover or something to hide in. And even if I have to get up like in a tree right next to a pine tree where I'm breaking branches to have shooting lanes, I'd rather that than just be out there in a lone oak or maple.
Totally. Yeah. What's the size tree you like to climb now in your saddle?
I like a bigger tree, but not so big that I had like I did one that I had to like throw my ropes around and catch them.
Yeah.
And there was like it was sketchy. Even locked in, it was sketchy putting it up. But I do like a bigger tree, and so that I can actually hide it, because I've been in some that are kind of small and it feels like you're up there looking like a lollipop.
Yeah.
It's like I want some decent cover. And two, I think it helps hide, like if you have a pack up there, or I think, really sticking out to the deer, I think they see it. And I've seen the difference, like where I've been up there on a thin tree and have a deer look right at you.
Yeah.
And then other times when you're on a little bit of a bigger tree, they walk right by, like they never saw anything.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like what they're used to seeing in the woods when they're walking and they don't pay attention, the only skinny trees that have any kind of a mass on it are those little burls that come off of trees, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, that doesn't look fucking...
Yeah, even if you're standing motionless.
That doesn't look right.
And I think I told you, so I hit a deer this year, real nice 8-pointer. And before I got 2 inches of penetration and there was no blood, and he's alive. We got pictures of him.
That was shoulder shot, right?
Yeah, it was right in the shoulder. But the night before that, I think I told you, he came in with a doe that was clearly hot, and she picked me off in the saddle. And she was like staring at me. It got dark. He ended up coming 10 feet under my stand. I think I told her, I hit the light trying to get down, and he was right under me. I could see all his tines. And he was clueless. And so when I went back the next day, the day that I shot him, I moved the stand like 40 yards. And sure enough, that same doe came by, and she was stopping, staring up the tree. So
That's
it was
cool.
good, and I ended up getting a shot at him and thought it was good. Like I said, I told you, like, Luminoc was in him, bound off, it fell out. I'm like, all right. And when I ever went up there, and it was like 2 inches of penetration, the broadhead was gone and not a drop of blood, and was sick about it. But now I'm actually pretty happy because I got more pictures of him. The pictures I had of him before I shot him were just kind of his rack, and his rack's unbelievable, but I didn't really have any good pictures of his body. And then since that, at another spot, he showed up, and I have pictures of him, and he looks like a young deer. He looks like he's like only 3.5. So.
And what you said is
Yeah. And the spot that I have the new pictures of him is where I killed the big one. and he looks almost identical to what the big one looked like at
At
3 years old.
Yeah.
He was a mainframe 8-pointer.
Yeah.
Long times. And if you look at the
And
pictures
somebody shot him when he was 3.
Yeah. Somebody
and injured him. Same
in the
thing, shoulder.
Yeah. Same size shoulder, too.
Yeah.
So,
and then the next year he started to drop time when he was 4.
Yeah. So maybe we started another one.
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he like the angles of all his times are almost exactly like the big one.
Yep.
At that age.
Yeah, probably the same genes, you know. Yeah. That would be awesome. Yeah, I found that I don't get picked off as much in my climber as I do in my saddle. But I haven't hunted a ton from the saddle this year, maybe 4 or 5 sits. Yeah. Because I've kept it in that tree just for ease. Just like it's a long walk in and stuff. And I've kept it in that tree, and I've got a couple climbers. So I've been hunting mostly out of the climber this year. I haven't been picked off, you know, by a doe or anything in the climber. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but
I don't know. I think like I've been trying to like fine tune what I do in the saddle, because I think at first it was that I was too comfortable with my movements. I think some of those movements, like the swinging movements, like when you swing to the side, I've been trying to think of it like that. If you see something move like that, I think you can get it like a windy day. You'll get away with a lot more in a saddle.
Yeah.
But some of those movements that feel like you feel like you're moving very easily, I think looking up would be a very odd thing for a deer to see.
Yeah.
So I've been more cautious about what kind of movements I'm doing in the saddle.
That's probably what it is. Yeah, because when I'm in my climber, the only move I make is straight up.
Yeah.
I stand up from my seat.
Yeah.
As soon as I hear a deer, or as soon as I hear a grunt, like the other day, I heard a grunt before I saw the deer. I heard the grunt. I'm like, oop, stand up. And just stand up right away, and it's just a straight movement. And then I'm there, and I'm, not moving at all until you're drawing. Yeah, but saddles are awesome. I love it. I got to get my saddle, my whole setup lighter, because I'm using all kind of older stuff.
Yeah.
And now with the new technology, you got those hyper lights.
Yeah, so that was, for anyone that doesn't know, I won the hyper light setup at Huntstock in one of the door raffles, and the sticks are unbelievable. Like, I mean, to have all 4, it's so light, and they're easy to put on. I think I told you I added, an 8er to get a little higher. But the saddle itself is great. It's comfortable. Like, I went from a tethered that I was happy with. I had no problems with it, but then switching to the trophy line, it's definitely got more back support. I don't know, less hip pinch, I think. So
was it the Venatic saddle? Do you remember what the
yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, the product is. Yeah. I think that's the one I use too.
Yeah, it's I like it a lot, and all the rope, like you say, going from the older system to the new, like all the ropes are thinner. It's got an adjustable bridge, so that's what actually. I don't really adjust the bridge at all, but what I do like is it comes off. So my tethered saddle is always connected, so I have to tuck it in my belt when I climb, either up or down, because it gets caught.
That's the way mine is right now.
Yeah, and so that's one good thing is when you're done, when you're going to climb, you unclip the bridge.
You got another
and put
pocket
it on one
for
side. It's not even a pocket; just hangs off your side, but it's not on the front of you.
Yeah.
So it doesn't catch on the steps.
Yeah, it doesn't catch on the step. Even walking in and out, it's annoying to have to tuck it into your belt.
Yeah. And when I went up to New Hampshire with my son the other day, we were both in saddles. He was wearing my tethered, and I had to make sure. I was like jamming it down. And he's like, "What are you doing? Why are you jamming it so far in my pants?" I'm like, "Because it's gonna come out, and you're gonna end up getting stuck." And when you're hunting with your kid, it's like you're so worried. Yeah. It's like all the stupid stuff you do by yourself that you're overly cautious.
Yeah. Well, your first buck was the 230 pounder, and you guys, if you haven't seen the pictures, he's got them on his page and Bow Hunt Mass page. And it's a long ass deer, and just a huge body. But he was there's so many acorns around. He was just fattened up off of acorns.
Yeah, and when we cut him, the amount of fat he had on his body still was unbelievable. I mean, he had inches of fat on his back, his stomach, his kidney fat on the inside was just loaded. I mean, he was just in shape. He was ready to go for the rut.
And then this second buck that you just got, which is another beautiful buck, and we just like green scored it about 136, something like that. And that was a fast green score. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he was 140. Beautiful deer, but he weighed what, 150?
156. And I don't think he's a young deer. So we were talking about it earlier, like, it's after the rut and everything, but he was just a smaller deer. Like his length isn't there. He definitely was a shooter. I'm not regretting shooting him at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, the body and that was like the story to him is not that great because I didn't have. I think 3 weeks ago I sent you a picture of him. The first time I saw him, he came through. It was like beginning as the rut was kicking off. He wasn't with anybody. Never saw him again. And then what was it? That morning that I killed him was raining. I think I was planning on hunting somewhere else and got up a little late because I was like, I don't know if I want to hunt. So I put the rain gear on and went out because it was the closest spot. And he was the only deer I saw. He came in. He was cruising. So I don't know if he was, back off a doe and looking for another one. But I knew with that flyer he had off of his G2, I knew it was him as soon as I saw him and knew I was going to shoot him.
Oh yeah.
If I had the chance. And then I talked to another hunter that we know in the area, and I guess he's had a bunch of pictures of him this year. He knew about him, and he thought he was a younger deer. But I think, you saw the bases on him, off those bases, and I don't think he's a 3.5-year-old deer. That's what this guy thought he was. So I think he's definitely older than that.
Be interesting to have you ever done the cementum aging? Did you do that with your?
Yeah, I did it with the big one.
Deerage.com or something?
He was 9.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was deerage.com.
Yeah.
And but I just wanted I needed to know that age. Like this one, like it is what he's dead now. I have him, so and I'm not, like I said, I'm not regretting it, but the body, and I think it also goes like people. Like some people aren't going to be 6'4", and the guy that's 6'4" is going to weigh a hell of a lot than the guy that's 5'7".
Yeah. And no matter, how much working out I do, I'm not going to be bulking up to your size. You just got a different frame than I do.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing is that a lot of people look at a body on a deer and say, that's definitely the body of a 4.5-year-old. And it's like, I don't buy that all the time. Like when they show the pictures of what a 3.5-year-old body, 4.5. I mean, so this deer, I think you agree. I don't think that deer was a 3.5-year-old deer.
No. And yeah, that whole thing with the bodies and a 3-year-old's gonna have a straight back and a 4-year-old, it's gonna start to dip, and that's probably like the average 3-year-old and the average 4-year-old is like that, but there's so much range on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like that buck that I was hunting Spooky, where I put up a video on my Instagram of him after Spooky was killed. I put up a video because I wasn't sharing those videos until he was dead. Yeah. And that thing's got like 1.1 million views right now on Instagram. It just like it's gone crazy. So there's hundreds of comments, and in the caption, I wrote that he's probably 11 and a half years old based on all of the knowledge I have of everybody else who's been hunting him. And some people have pictures back to 2016 of him, and I've seen those, and he looks like a 4-year-old in 2016. Yeah. So he's 10, 11, or 12. He's somewhere in that range. And the amount of comments on there, that ain't no 12-year-old deer. He's got a straight back. That's a young deer. He's a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. It's like, dude, not every deer is going to be the average baseline, poster deer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think we went through them too. Like when I killed that one 2 years ago, we had all the pictures back to the first year he got shot from that guy, and
which I think was 2016 as well.
And as going back to like what he should look like, I said all day long that deer was a 4.5-year-old deer the year he got shot, and so that would have put him at 10.5. And sure enough, we got him aged. He was 9.5. So that first picture that I would have bet my life on, he was a 4.5-year-old deer. He was a 3.5-year-old deer. So it just shows, we all, I think at times that I've done it and you've done it, I think everyone's done it, is like, we know enough. That's definitely, that deer's this old. And
you can't do that unless you have a ton of other information like you did with that one. You know who shot him, and the first. Yeah, and we were
still wrong, even with all that info. Like we knew, we could say, okay, he was 3.5 or 4.5 at that time. But, even with that, we were still wrong.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah, Pat Burns was, I think he had it right on. I think he was saying that his buck was 11.5 all along, and it ended up coming back 11.5.
Well, the big thing we do too is the other, internet deer knowledge is their biggest year is going to be like 5.5, maybe 6.5, and then they go downhill. That deer was 9.5, and I have pictures of him the whole way through. I think he lost some length, from the year before, but he gained other stuff that I think his highest scoring rack was at 9.5 years old.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another one of those things, dude. Like if you take every deer in the country and you take the average feed and whatever, it's all based basically on the Midwestern feed
Yeah.
and being around agriculture. Like everybody, all the stats and all those pictures and everything is
Yeah.
probably you're thinking of like it's Iowa, Illinois,
Yeah.
Ohio, and that's what everything is based off of. I just think our deer are different up here.
Yeah. Well, and I learned since I think our last podcast is I think I told you when we aged that deer and took his jaw out, he had this big cavity that was rotten into his jaw.
Yeah.
So I was saying, that it's probably his last year. So, and this might go into why we could never find his sheds or anything. So I was talking to a biologist about it, and from the state, Mass State, and he was like, oh, that's because some homeowners feed them year round. And I was like, really? And he was like, oh yeah, it's from like people feeding sweet feed and stuff. It's the sugars that they're not used to will rot their teeth. And that, so now it makes sense because it's like, because outside of the rut, we had no idea where he was. And, nobody ever found his sheds. And so it had to be like some little pocket. Somebody, it's probably some little old lady feeding her pet deer.
Yeah.
But, and I never thought of that, like feeding, always people argue about if you should feed deer in the off season or not, or like over the winter to help them. But I never thought of that, like tooth decay.
Yeah.
It's
me
it's a
either.
crazy thing.
And that's funny too, because now I'm thinking back to Spooky, same thing. I hadn't heard of anybody who had that deer's sheds, and he was 11, so he dropped a lot of sheds over the years. Never heard of one person who had them, so
Well, we ended up finding
maybe it was the same thing.
Yeah, we ended up, and now I think I know where it is, but somebody ended up finding one of his sheds, like the year before sheds, after I killed him, and it was a non-hunter who was friends with a guy that hunted with me.
Really?
And he was like, oh, I know that deer, like, and I was like, I'll buy it. It was all chewed up. But I just wanted it.
Yeah.
And they kept it. But I ended up finding out where it was, and it was like this shed. Not saying this is where somebody was feeding them and keeping them, but this one shed was in like, I mean, you could probably see, I don't know, 15 to 20 houses from this little piece, and that's where we were shedding. I started to think, is that why we never found his sheds?
Yeah, they all
It's
he dropped them all right there.
Yeah, and because nobody went in there. Like it's such a small piece that it would be weird to even go in there shed hunt. Like somebody would come out and be like, "What are you doing?"
Oh man, yeah, that was like me. I was shed hunting last year, and I walked in there. There's a town piece, one of our neighboring towns here, and it kind of goes down, cuts across, goes up. It's a little finger of a town piece that goes down to like a cul-de-sac, and I was shed hunting the big woods around it. Didn't find much, and I just walked down that little finger, and I found like 3 sheds in that little finger, and I could see a lady. She has this nice, like super, like the size of that wall, like it's all glass, looking out into the woods there. And she just like sees me walking down that. And she comes out. She comes all the way out into the woods. What are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm just shed hunting. She had no idea what it was. I'm like, yeah, I'm just out here finding sheds. She's like, it's raining. I'm like, yeah, that's the best time to go look for sheds. Actually, they stand out a lot more. But she was kind of standoffish, like she didn't want me there. I'm like, I'm on a piece of town land here.
Yeah.
I was like, I know where the properties are. I'm on the town, and she was being kind of weird about it. But yeah, so that's like, I know what you're saying. If you go into a place like that, you're inviting potential, conversations like that.
Conversation, and I don't know if you want to get into like. So after that first buck I killed this year, I had this big to do with the property that I killed him on that I was hunting 22 years. And back 22 years ago when I got permission, they were like, we just don't want to see you. Like, we don't like deer being killed. So they never saw me drag a deer out in 22 years. And, it was never had a problem. It abutted a piece that was known to like the people. It was a big piece of land. They were known, like, they do not like, not that they don't like hunters, they just don't allow it. And they wouldn't even bring, have it be a question of if they were going to allow hunters. So sure enough, unbeknownst to me, somebody that I knew, and he didn't know I hunted next door, but got permission. Big long story how I won't get into that, but he got permission to hunt it. Didn't know I hunt next door. And you know this, I usually carry all my deer out whole.
Yeah.
Like, because just another thing, like, I don't want to leave a gut pile on somebody's property that I'm hunting.
Yeah.
But this deer, at 2:30 dressed, I was like, and we had an uphill drag because he ran from the property, and the property.
290-pound deer. You don't want to take.
Well, and the
Yeah,
property.
it's all
It ran downhill and downhills towards that other property.
Yeah.
So I was like, and I was with my son to drag it out. So I'm like, I'm gutting this deer. So I gut the deer. The next day, this guy that we know that got permission is just scouting the property, finds a gut pile,
Yeah.
and tells the homeowner, like, hey, somebody's hunting your property. So it was like, ended up being a big to do. They followed the drag marks, left a note up where I was hunting. Well, actually where I was parking, because it was next to the property.
Yeah.
And so it was a big to do. They ended up calling the EPOs. The EPOs went out there and were like, oh, he was on the other property, like he's not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think at that time they even knew. The other hunter calls me and is like, hey, so sorry to start all this. I didn't know it was you hunting there. And then his homeowner goes up, steals my camera.
Yeah. Yeah, you told me.
Yeah, steals my camera. I had to go to his house and get it.
And your camera wasn't on his property; it was on the one.
No, it was on the one I had permission on. So then the old guy that I have permission from, I had to go talk to him, like, hey, sorry about this like big issue. And he's like,
I know you don't want to see me, but
well, he actually said, which was funny after all these years, he's like, I forgot you were even hunting out there. Yeah. I'm like, well, you told me not to. You didn't want to see me.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I guess I did. he goes, how long's it been? I go, 22 years. I'm 41. I was 19 when I started hunting there.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh boy. He's like, well, sorry your camera got taken.
What do you want from your trail cameras? I know what I want. You basically just want to make sure that if a buck walks in front of it, the camera is capturing it, plain and simple, right? And with cell cameras, you want to make sure that after it captures it, it's getting sent to you and it's not getting hung up somewhere, and you don't have to worry about, oh, did you format the SD card the right way, or did you use the right SIM card with the right cellular network, or what did you do that is making this image get caught up? With Moultrie Mobile, you don't have to worry about that. I've been using Moultrie Mobile cell cams for 5 years now. The ones that I bought 5 years ago are still working. They're outdated now, but they're still working. But this year I'm running 20 Moultrie Edge 2 Pro cell cams. And I know when I put that into a tree, it is giving me the confidence that it's working. And there's brands out there where you just don't know, and you don't have the confidence when it's up in a tree, and then you have to talk to customer service, and you have to go through a whole line of troubleshooting items. With the Moultrie mobile cameras, they make it super simple. They have an auto connect feature, which will find the strongest cell signal around from the 4 major networks and automatically connect to that, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to install a SIM card. You don't have to bring an SD card and format it. Everything is built into the camera. The technology is all built into it. And that leads to a reliable camera that I can be confident in. And if you guys are looking for the right cell cam, if you already run cell cameras, you run different brands, I recommend getting a couple of these Moultrie Edge 2 Pros or any of the Edge 2 cell cams in that series, and just give them a shot. Run them against the other cameras that you have, and you'll be happy with the results. So go check them out. Don't just capture images, gather intelligence with the Moultrie Mobile Edge 2 camera series paired with the super simple and easy to use Moultrie Mobile app. You can learn more at moultrieproducts.com.
And then you ended up getting that camera back, didn't you?
Yeah, I got the camera back, and and the guy was he's like, well, it was pointing towards my property, which it was.
Yeah,
it's like open hardwoods. It was just pointed down a run. So whatever. It was just a hassle. It's just funny how no problems at all in 22 years. I actually.
It's just nobody else was hunting that next door neighbor.
Yeah,
property.
nobody was hunting. My son killed his first deer there when he was 12. He killed his buck there this year.
Yeah,
and it's just funny how it happens. How one little one permission change can change everything. But
yep.
I think I told them I wasn't going to hunt there the rest of the year anyway. So hopefully it smooths out.
Let it all settle down.
Yeah, but it just the world of hunting. It's like how small of a world it is. That in this little spot that where it is a guy that I know from
Yep.
New Hampshire.
Yep.
Ends up getting permission next door.
Yeah. It is. It's so crazy, but it also can force you when little things like that happen, and it force you to go scout new places too, right? Like not force you because you're still probably going to be able to hunt there, right?
Yeah, but that's what I gave it a rest just because like it was such a big deal. Like I think I don't know if I told you this. At first the property, the guy who rents the property was like, oh, the EPOs were here, they took your camera. So I ended up calling the EPOs like to complain, like, why'd you guys take my camera?
Yeah.
And so the captain ended up calling me back, and he's like, we didn't take your camera. Like, our guy was there, you weren't doing anything illegal, so we left. I'm like, well, my camera's gone. That was before I knew, before I knew that the homeowner took it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a disaster. But
but
it worked out.
I don't hunt any really. I have one private permission over in farm country over there, but I hardly ever hunt it because I haven't had any good deer on camera there. I think you said the one that you got in like 2013 or something. That nice. You got a big one.
Oh yeah, the double drop.
It was pretty close. He was running over where I got permission in the big patch back there that I don't think you can hunt that big patch, but where he was running through. But
yeah, that's where because I never knew about that deer, and other hunters that were hunting that back then had pictures of them. And I have a farm across the street from you there that I hunt in tons and tons of does, but I've got like one decent.
Do you have cameras in there this year?
I have a camera in there now, but nothing like if you want to go shoot a doe, I'll bring you there tomorrow. You'll shoot 5.
Yeah,
but it's full of does, but one decent buck came through in the rut, but nothing solid.
Yeah. So I don't hunt very many private places, but what forces me to find new places, like kind of the same type scenario, except it's not somebody getting permission next door, but I move out when the fucking acorns are dried up. Yeah. If it's a bad acorn year, and I'm hunting because my public places they're basically around acorns and swamps. And if there's no acorns, it just forced me to go find new places, and then just adds to the list of places you can go hunt. But turns out the last couple of years I've been hunting. This spot has had acorns, and it's just been awesome. The activity never slows down in there, so I just kind of keep hammering that same spot.
Yeah, I think in our area here, in most of Eastern Mass, I think there's some good public that doesn't really get hunted that hard. I think people overlook it, and I think a lot of people are like, it's public, and they don't want to go even spend the time there,
Also, I was just talking to another buddy about this. Like, you go into a place, and there's tons of stands. Like, where I was hunting spooky, you would just never guess that this is where a big deer, like a giant deer, is living. Because you go into it, the woods didn't look good. It was very open. I found like 7 tree stands in it. It's like 60 acres, of public land, like 60 acres. And there's stands all over it, all in shitty trees, like in bad spots.
Yeah.
But that's because like the where the big buck was living was right behind the houses. He was living in the backyards and just bedding just off of backyards. That's where all of his sign was. His scrape lines were there. But like those little patches of public land that have tons of stands everywhere that doesn't look that great can be like sleeper spots.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you when you said move after I killed that first buck, I started scouting places I haven't been before. And I told you I scouted this one spot that just looked amazing, like on aerial view, and went in there and found like 8 tree stands.
Yeah.
They all kind of look like, and I think I called you that day, they're either abandoned, like newly abandoned, or they're just like gun stands, like somebody who gun hunts it, put them all up, but it was just like around every corner. Yeah. It's like there was a tree stand in there for every angle to shoot the whole piece, but there was no like active. There wasn't one camera, there was like nobody was really putting the time in. There was just stands up.
Yeah, that's another good point that I find a lot is that in those places where you see a ton of stands, like you can't let that discourage you because probably 80% of those, if not all of them, are gun stands.
Yeah.
And the bow season here is during the rut. I mean, you get first picks. A lot of the woods, I hardly ever see other hunters in the woods, and I'm hunting public land. I saw one hunter this year, 2 hunters actually. It was on the same day. It was the only Saturday I hunted this year because normally I'm just hunting weekdays. But yeah, Saturday you probably bump into a lot of people, but I've never bumped into another person in the weekdays, even in those little public pieces.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of people like you drive around, you're not seeing people getting dressed on the side of the road. Like where we live, I think even if people are hunting a lot, I think people go out of their way to hide their hide their activity.
Yeah,
because you don't need some anti-hunter coming in on you. But it's so funny because you go, when you go out of state, like I was up New Hampshire, Vermont hunting, it's like there's just cars parked like out in the open. Where like if it was here, you'd be like, oh, I got to find a way to park my car so I don't draw attention to myself.
Totally. It's night and day to Vermont, like where I grew up hunting. It's just night and day. And even if you just go an hour west of us,
yeah,
you don't have you don't do that. It's normal. You can get dressed in your stand. Get dressed at your car and walk into your stand.
Yeah, that's one thing too. Like there's certain places, even with completely legit legal permission, where I make a conscious note, like I'm going to get dressed at my house. So when I get out, I just jump out and jump in the woods.
100%, dude.
Yeah.
One of my best spots, I literally get out of my truck. I pack everything on the right side of my vehicle in the morning. My bow's there, my pack is there, because I pull over on the side of a road, park on a public road.
Yeah.
And I sit in my car when I pull there and I wait for traffic to go by. And then I get out and I run as fast as I can to the other side. I got a couple of guys have hunted it with me, and I have to tell them before we go. I'm like, look, this is like you get out, you close the door, and then you duck down behind the truck and stay close to it to let any traffic go by if there is any. And then when the coast is clear and you use your ears, you don't hear any traffic coming, we dart across the street.
And it's funny. It's like, and you're going into I think I know the spot you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's like 100% legal public land spot.
Yeah.
But it's in this area, if you are standing out there with your bow, somebody's going to call the cops and the cops are going to be there. I've had that happen with duck hunting a public spot in an open town, and had 3 days in a row. Had the cops come and leave me, because it's different shifts. Leave me notes like, what are you doing? Call us. I'm like, I'm duck hunting. But it's like it's just so not normal around here.
Yeah, it's
right
funny.
Now.
One morning at my house, I heard some gunshots, or my wife did, or somebody, and they're like, I hear some gunshots over there in the park. I think I texted you.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, did you guys hear those gunshots? Because your house isn't too far from mine. And you're like, oh yeah, that was me. I was duck hunting.
Yeah. Yeah, and that spot.
Yeah,
it was like, where it's in a town that's completely open.
It's on the border of the town that's not.
Yeah. But sure enough, every time I go there, cops are involved somehow. Yeah. So I have in the past called before I go, and I'm like, to call dispatch. I'm like, hey, this is why
probably gonna get some calls.
This is where I'm going. It's legal.
Yeah.
I think one of the times I did that, they still showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what do they do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's just, they're trying to appease the people calling, I think.
Yeah, when I do that hiding on this, I pack everything on the side. I get out. Sometimes I'll be waiting there for 5 minutes next to my car, waiting for the traffic to be done.
Yeah.
And then I'll get into the woods. But it's not so much that I'm worried about someone calling the cops or an anti-hunter. It's like I don't want other hunters to see me see a hunter going into the woods there. Well, because it's one of those overlooked places that I love those places.
Well, and nowadays we all have on X. Yeah. So it's like, same as you would do if you saw a guy there, you'd be like, wonder where he's going. Pull up on X and look, look at the town piece there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like really most of it is hiding from other hunters is what I don't want them to see me,
Yeah.
But
and that's the same as it goes, when you kill one. Now, it's a little different now that we can we can get a confirmation online. But before that, or even in the opening a shotgun, when you kill that deer and tag it, you got to get it in your car, and you legally have to have it showing.
Yeah.
So it's like
you have to have at least one piece of the deer sticking out of your car,
sticking out, or the EPOs could take it.
Yeah.
And fine you for it. So, but it's like, everybody that you drive by hates seeing that. They're all pissed off about it. But back when I first started hunting in my early 20s, if you killed a deer on Saturday night and found it, either found it Saturday night late or Sunday, you couldn't check it in till Monday because there was no online tagging. So you'd have to have that deer visible to the public all weekend.
Until you can't even have it at your house, or could you?
Yeah, but it has to be you can't hide it out back or anything. It needs to be visible. Same thing. or at least that's the way I viewed the law. But it had to be visible to the public. So it's like, at the time I lived on Route 20 in Sudbury. Me and my buddy both were hunting, and we'd have deer hanging up there.
Yeah.
And, the cops would show up and be like, "What are you doing with this deer?" We're like, "We're hanging it. Like, we got to, we have to check it in on Monday."
And in most of the country, dude, hanging your deer in
Yeah.
your yard on a meat pole was like that's just everybody does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, imagine. I have a pole out in my backyard now, so just my two neighbors, who both give me permission to hunt within 500 feet of their house. They don't care. I think before I moved in, they didn't really know much about hunting, but once you start talking to people about hunting, they don't mind. Like, I have my deer hanging back on that pole for a day or two after I kill it.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that we should talk about now, because you just brought up spooky, and you just brought up that you have permission from your neighbors, the whole 500-foot rule. And me and you were talking via text about how, I think that guy that killed Spooky and got fined, like, he's taking a beating online.
Yeah, he is. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, I do too, because it's like, one, like, yes, he broke the law, like, whether it was intentional or not, I don't know. It was, but still, like, I think it's one of the laws that most bow hunters can agree to. Like, it's ridiculous that we have it's a 500-foot rule for a gun and a bow, especially if you were pointed in a safe direction. But, that besides the point. It's a law is a law. You have to follow it. But, I mean, the guy's taking an absolute beating. Like, people are, calling him a scumbag. And it's like, if it was an accident, like, yes, he's supposed to know the rules, but doesn't mean he's a scumbag. It's like, I feel bad for him.
And I met the guy, and I had a long conversation with him, and he was a really nice guy. Like, I can tell he's not a scumbag. The guy he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
What I think might have happened is that he got permission from a landowner to go through their yard, and he got permission from that house, from what I was hearing. And I think that maybe he thought because he got permission from that house, he was able to hunt on their property regardless of a 500-foot setback.
Yeah.
Because that was something when I first moved here that when I bought the piece of land behind my house, I was thinking, oh, cool, I bought 1.5 acres. I can hunt on my property no matter what, right? Like, that's how I thought about it originally. And then I was like, oh, no, want to learn all the setback laws. Because that's when I first really started bow hunting, too, is when I bought my house and I bought that piece of land. And I was like, well, you got to get permission from the neighbors. That kind of sucks.
Yeah. Because
in Vermont and a lot of other places, you can hunt your own property. I don't think that law applies like that. It's like, in Massachusetts, it's just very liberal. And this guy lived in New Hampshire too, where the laws are a lot different up there.
Yeah.
So I think happened was that he got permission from that landowner and was like, I can hunt anywhere on that property without thinking about that. Yeah. So.
Well, and like we said, like, the laws are the law, and I feel bad for any of the other guys that were hunting them that were following the rules to the T, if that's how it happened. But, I think it's one of those things, like, I bring it up just because it's like, at least go easy on the guy a little bit, because it's like, I think it's a law we can all agree as bow hunters, like, it's ridiculous law. Like, and two, like, it's one thing if you were, in that zone, like, shooting towards a house, that's bad. But if you're pointing in a safe direction, like, there should be, and I know we're never going to get these laws. It's the same as the arguments that we should be allowed to hunt on Sundays, and there's a bunch of laws that are horrible. But
I could see that setback law being changed in the next 5 years. I could see it.
Yeah, but you have to get the right state reps to put a bill forward and support the bill, and I think it's tough. I know a couple state reps that I've talked to about gun laws and when the last gun law bill was going on. And the scary thing is, like, they have no clue what they're voting for. Like, most of these people have no clue about hunting or guns, and they just vote the way their party tells them to vote. And, like, when I've had discussions with them, they're like, oh, really? Like, when they hear semi-automatic, like, weapons. And, when I brought up, I was like, this is the shotgun I duck hunt with. And they're like, what? I'm like, it's plugged. It only takes 3 rounds.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh.
Yeah. And by the way, like, duck bullets, they probably think it's a freaking flying projectile that can go a mile, right? Like,
in 80 yards, it could hit your kid and do nothing.
Exactly. It just dissipates.
It's it is a shame that You know, and I think like I have one guy who's my neighbor down the Cape who's a state rep out of Boston. And he's like, well, you know, he's like, I'm going to have to vote the way my constituents want me to vote, and they're in the city. So they were very anti-gun because of the gun violence. And what I just want to like wish we could get through people's heads is like that gun violence in Boston is not from
Hunters.
Second Amendment supporters that are trying to either, you know, secure their property and life, or hunters. Or like those are people with illegal guns that probably got it from, you know, breaking into a house or illegally purchasing it out of state. Like those gun laws that they pass aren't affecting those people at all.
The two biggest issues with the gun violence is, like you said, it's criminals who aren't going to worry about the laws or the rules anyway.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, like, every once in a while you get a mentally unstable person, like that guy who was a hunter. I forget who it was, but just last year shot at police officers from his house.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yep, I do remember.
And then
that.
he killed himself, or he got shot by the police. I forget what happened. But every once in a while you have somebody who is a 2A person, but their mental health has declined or whatever, and we've got to figure out how to get guns away from those people for sure.
Yeah, and it's going to happen. But really, and as you know, I'm retired now, but I spent almost 20 years as a cop. We have mandatory minimum laws in the state. If you get caught with an illegal gun, you're supposed to do either 5 years in prison. Throughout my time as a police officer, every illegal gun that we got off the street that went to court in that time, I never saw one person serve the mandatory minimum.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of definition of mandatory they're using, because but like those are the laws we need to enforce and make stricter, not limit what my 14-year-old son can hunt with when we go duck hunting. You know, it's just ridiculous.
Totally agree on that. And then back to the EPO thing too. I was talking with Pat Burns because so if we edit it, so a buddy of mine got a buck confiscated by the EPOs, and it was because he didn't have his archery stamp. And okay, that's a dumb mistake, but it's a mistake, and it's a mistake that you can see happening. It was just a technicality. Purchased his license every year before. He had also purchased the archery stamp. There was something different online that, you know, the licensing system was a little messed up this year, something different. He just didn't have his archery stamp. But it's not like he was trying to hide or save $10, dude. He spends thousands of dollars on hunting. You're not trying to save $10 by not getting your archery stamp. So I think confiscating a buck from somebody for that type of a minimal offense is a little bit of an overstep. So like Pat was like, there should totally just be different level. The way that there's misdemeanors in the crime that you used to fight, misdemeanors, you get like petty theft, and then there's grand theft, and then, you know, assault's even more serious than that, and aggravated assault, and then manslaughter and murder. There's levels to everything. Yeah. And it should be like that. Like if somebody didn't get their archery stamp and they're posting about their buck kill on social media, which is how they found this. Yeah. He posted on social media.
Yeah, so like you said, he wasn't trying to hide it.
And the EPOs must like watch everybody that posts anything on social media and then look their name up in the system and see. Scan, run it again. It's like, 3 of those people didn't have their archery stamp, right? Yeah. So then they're looking at that, and then they wait for them to tag the deer in, and then they show up and say, hey, you didn't have your archery stamp. To me, that feels like they should have the conversation with them and say, we're going to give you a written warning here. You know, maybe pay a fine. It's a low thing. Pay a fine. Pay the $10, or maybe it's $50. But because you messed up. You didn't get your archery stamp. You're supposed to. It's part of the law. But it's a minor infraction. We're not going to take your deer. Yeah. Just make sure you do this in the future.
And to your point, like you said, like if somebody was just hiding the deer and clearly openly trying to like poach a deer and not tag it, then put the screws to them.
Yeah. But if you're obviously like posting it out on all your social media, it's like,
well, it's funny you say
you're not trying to hide anything.
They must just be running it. So like I said, my time in law enforcement, when I picked up sergeant, I was in sergeant school with the local sergeant, EPO sergeant here, know him very well, and first name basis. And I was working one day. I'm in my patrol car. I say, I'm like, hey, how you doing? And he's like, good. How's your hunting season going? This is years ago. I'm like, oh, good. I got an 8-pointer last week. And he's like, oh yeah. And he's while we're sitting there talking, he's running it. I'm like, well, I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm just make sure you checked your deer in. I'm like, what what the hell? I'm like, of course I did. You think I'm going to sit here and tell you about it?
Yeah.
You know? And he's like, oh, yeah, you did. But it was like, I was laughing. I'm like,
that's another thing too. Like, yeah, why would you be posting about it if you're trying to hide anything?
Yeah.
That's another thing with the spooky situation. Is I don't think he was trying. I don't think he was intentionally doing anything wrong because he posted it everywhere.
well, and from what I heard, like from what you told me, he told you exactly where he killed the deer. Like, oh, like this is where I was. Like,
Yeah, not exactly, but he
Yeah.
he gave a lot of details on it, and said I got permission from that house yesterday, and I don't think he intentionally did anything, which sucks. That and I hope if he sees this, like, reach out, because we were friends on Facebook that day,
Yeah.
and then after everything happened, like, I don't know if he blocked me or defriended me or
he was.
you know.
He, like you said, everybody was he probably thought you were the one that called too.
Yep, that's what people are saying. Oh, I called it in. I didn't call it in.
Yeah.
I think he was a great guy. I think he unintentionally did something wrong. The 500-foot setback thing, it does suck. Like, we should all fight to get that lowered.
Yeah. No, it makes sense for guns, but
It does make sense for guns.
yeah, but it doesn't. It's a little ridiculous sometimes when it comes to. It'd be one thing if you're hunting a piece where you're surrounded by houses.
Yeah.
Then but there's sometimes like you're in. If you're say 300 feet off a backyard because that's where you have permission, and you're shooting into 50 acres of land.
Yeah.
There's no danger there.
Or also, even if it's not taking it from 500 feet down to 250, another compromise is, like, if you get permission from a landowner to hunt on their property, you should be able to hunt on that property.
Yeah, and
regardless of a setback.
The other thing too is safe direction.
Yeah.
Like I know because the 500 foot has no mention of direction.
Yeah.
So I know, like, when we've goose hunted, sometimes we've had this like dilemma because there was times like we were hunting golf courses, goose hunting,
Yeah.
and you could like in your mind safely hunt 100 feet off the or less than 100 feet off the road shooting over the golf course, but you can't. But you go to that 150 area,
face the road.
and face the road, and that's legal.
Yeah.
You can legally do it.
Yeah.
It's like there should be some common sense in it.
Yeah. And then Connecticut, like, do you know the laws in Connecticut?
No.
I think it's 10 feet off a road you can hunt. So, and that's what it is in Vermont too. But even with rifle in Vermont, you can hunt 10 foot off a road. Connecticut, there's no setback law anywhere. So people literally do hunt off back porches. They hunt right in the backyard in a tree.
Yeah.
And even if they only own a quarter of an acre, you can hunt there. And if you get permission there, you can hunt there and you can shoot, right in the backyard. They have literally zero setbacks.
Yeah. Like I said, I think some of it makes sense, but it's also there has to be some common sense.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what the setback is, like I said, with that goose thing, it's like it doesn't make if you're shooting towards something that you shouldn't be shooting towards, it doesn't matter how far away you are.
Yeah.
It's
Think about how much more land would open up than where we hunt.
Yeah.
Like in the eastern Massachusetts area.
I know.
Holy shit, dude!
A lot of my permissions, private area permissions here, if I didn't have the permission from the homeowner to have the 500 foot, I wouldn't be able to hunt.
Yeah.
It's like, because a lot of places you can stay away from a neighbor's 500 feet, but a lot, how small this area is. Like, a lot of the places, if I didn't have that permission, there'd be no hunting there.
Exactly. Even if you have a great relationship with one landowner, you still might need to get 3 or 4 permissions right there in the neighbor, because the houses are all stacked up around here. And that's another funny thing. If you look at my Onyx, I got bubbles literally everywhere, which just shows me, like, the huntable land.
Yeah.
And Vortex Optics has sponsored the podcast. I have been a user of Vortex my entire bow hunting career. I've used their Diamondback 10x42 binoculars. I've used their laser rangefinder. And when I went out to North Dakota, I used a spotting scope out there, one of their angled spotting scopes to spot game far away. And Vortex is just a great company. I've obviously gotten to know them at Huntstock over the past few years. And they've got great customer service, an awesome warranty program,
and really good optics that don't break the bank. So if you guys are in need of any binoculars, scopes, they've got, red dots and other optics for rifles and gun hunting, or, binos, rangefinders, spotting scopes, tripods. You cannot go wrong with Vortex. So visit www.vortexoptics.com.
That's another interesting thing that I've looked up many times is what a dwelling is.
Yeah.
Because the way the rule is, it's 500 foot from a dwelling.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean a shed. It's not
it's got to be
detached garage.
Well,
but if it's attached, it counts.
Yeah, but it's also a dwelling. And this is a way that I had it like in courses at the police academy, was it has to be habitable.
Yeah.
So like if you had like an abandoned house out in the middle of nowhere, that's not a dwelling.
No. If you look up what the definition of to dwell is, or to look up the definition of dwelling, it is a place where a person lives.
Yeah.
So, but schools count, things like that.
Yeah.
Businesses.
Yeah.
Those are all dwellings. If there's a considerable amount of time where people are spending inside of it, I think it's working, school, or living.
Yeah. But like a storage building for a cell phone tower. That's not a dwelling.
Yeah.
Well, as far as I know.
Yeah. No.
I'll probably get cited.
No, I wouldn't be counting that as a dwelling.
Yeah.
Or like a wastewater treatment, like some of those places.
Like
a little brick building, pump house. That's not
pump house. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what just goes to show you all the freaking the gray areas and stuff. And
there's a lot of them, and really, like, no matter what the gray areas of the law, like, it's up to us as hunters to know it. Like, ignorance to the law.
Yeah.
You always hear this, like, ignorance to the law doesn't matter. Like, if you're like, I didn't know that, or that's not how you took it. And that's another big thing is from EPO to EPO could have a different understanding of that law.
Yeah, I'm sure they're not all 100%, in the same understanding. But look at this spot. Oh, my Onyx isn't working. But literally, I have some places where I've got a bubble, and then a bubble, and there's, it forms like a Terrence Howard would know what the fuck it was from his Joe Rogan thing. The space between two bubbles, it has like this elliptical, and it might be the size of two of these rooms.
Yeah.
So I go there with my Onyx, and I stand in that spot, and sometimes your blue dot bounces around a little bit, so you wait for it to settle and find out where it's settling most of the time, and then you just walk up to the edges of the bubbles. I'm looking at all the trees, like which one is my huntable tree?
Yeah.
Because the other thing about that 500-foot setback rule, it doesn't mean you can't shoot into that bubble.
Yeah.
It's where you're sitting. Where your tree is, where you're hunting from, where you release the arrow.
Yeah.
So as long as you have a huntable tree, in a small section like that, 100% fine. And you can find a lot of those in the suburban areas, dude. That bubble feature on Onyx is that I live by that.
And it's funny that you say about your little bubble bouncing, because like so many times I've done that and be like, okay, like I have to get to this point, like to be. At 500 feet, and I'm like that, like looking, picking a tree. I'm like, all right, I'm good to go. And then like get up in the tree and hunt, and I look, and it's like the bubble moves. And I'm like, oh, like it's like not comfortable. They're like, I gotta move this tree stand. Like just not wanting to get in trouble.
Yep.
But it's funny that GPS bubble does move.
Yeah, it bounces around a little bit for sure.
And unfortunately, that's not what you're going to be judged at. Like when the EPOs come out and find you, they're not going to say, oh, let me see your Onyx bubble. They're going to take a laser reading. And
I wonder how they do that. Yeah.
I think they use LiDAR. LiDAR.
Oh, so you can get through trees and stuff?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do that.
Because I wonder, sometimes I've been in that spot trying to figure out a tree and trying to laser through to get to a house with my rangefinder. And you can't because there's so many friggin' branches. But yeah, those spots are few and far between. I don't like to be that close, but there are some places, like when I was hunting spooky, where I was in a bubble the size of two of these rooms, and I hunted there once or twice, but it was like, all right, I found one end, not where he ended up getting shot. I was all the way on the other end of this place where he was using that back corner kind of as bedding too. But over there, you were close to a school. So I was 500 foot off of the school. 500 foot off of the other road over on the other side, and it left that tiny little piece. But you can't hunt the school land either.
Yeah.
So I also had this other line going this way. Bubble here, line here.
Yeah, that you couldn't shoot it.
That it couldn't shoot into that.
Yeah.
And because that's one of those places where you can't shoot into that. And that's the same as like posted property.
Yeah.
You can't shoot something on the place that you can't hunt. So I had that line to deal with too. So basically I was angling in, and the inward was a unposted private piece, which was totally fine and within those 2 bubbles.
Yeah.
And I did I talked to Pat Burns about just all the fine scouting that I did out there, fine tuning little places. That was the only place that was even close to being a 500 foot.
Yeah.
The other place was a big public piece that I was kind of out in the middle of. But yeah, sometimes you got to really do your homework and fine tune stuff and drill in on it, But yeah, I think there should be levels to how EPOs handle things. There should be written warnings, and if you forgot your archery stamp, dude, like I would say don't confiscate a deer.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. Like that, like we said before, I think in that situation when somebody's so openly like telling the world that they got a deer, like they're not trying to do anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's a mistake. I think it's different than if, homeowner called and said there's somebody hunting and the guy dragged a deer out and threw it in his truck and had it in his shed and never tagged it, then it's like, clearly you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. Or hunting over bait or shooting a deer at night.
Yeah.
Those should all be the most serious.
Yeah. Well, because if you're blatantly breaking the law, I think it's different. Like if that, like somebody is making a mistake, they should,
Well, I mean, you were a cop for 20 years. I mean, you probably dealt with some of that stuff. You probably use your discretion sometimes where you're like,
it's the same thing. It's actually the same thing like teaching new cops. Like there's a time to give somebody a break. There's people deserve breaks. There's nothing, even the crime of murder in the state doesn't say you have to arrest. You have to summons them. But I mean, there's times that you don't have to arrest somebody in front of their kid or, you don't, I think the only law out there that I know of that you have to arrest is for like domestic assault and battery. You have to arrest somebody, but there's times that you use your discretion on how you're going to handle something, And a lot of that, I don't know. I never worked for the EPOs, but I know a lot of it depends. You have to deal with your boss too. So, I mean, maybe some of them have their hands tied because they have a boss that doesn't want anyone using discretion. I don't know.
Yeah. The only time I've ever talked to the EPOs is at Huntstock. I got to meet the new one from down here. You said he's a nice guy. I haven't met him.
Yeah, I haven't seen him since he's been an EPO. But yeah, I
think
him.
Sergeant Amaral was do you know that dude? He was the guy I was dealing with at Huntstock.
No, Sergeant Nardi is, I think, the sergeant in our area, or was last year.
Yeah. Yeah, well, all good stuff to talk to them about at Huntstock next year anyway. It's nice having them there because people...
Well, and some of these things, like I've had conversations with EPOs before, and some of them, they're like on our page. Like, that's a stupid law. But they still have a job to do.
Yep, totally. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah,
Another awesome season.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to try to put some time in New Hampshire now, fill my tag.
Yeah.
See how much I can piss my wife off by driving to New Hampshire.
You're going to try to do some tracking, right?
Yeah. I just told you I sighted in a nice little short 30-30 with a sling on it, so I can move around in the woods and see what I can do.
Those trackers will say, you don't need a sling. You want to keep it at the ready all the time.
Yeah.
There's this guy in Vermont. So I went to Vermont last weekend for rifle opener, and all I did was I scouted Friday. I had one of my buddies was bow hunting Friday because the season runs all the way up. You can bow hunt the day before rifle opener. So he bow hunted, and me and my other buddy just kind of scouted our way towards him, maybe to do, if there were any deer, we might kick something to him. And found a logging road that had tons of scrapes on it. So in our very short scouting, I was like, all right, I'm going to come to this logging road tomorrow and sit this. I'm sitting there opening day, and it's like dead silent, hardly any wind, super quiet in the woods. And a partridge gets flushed like an hour into my sit on the logging road. I was like, oh, maybe a deer's coming down. I turn around, and it's this guy that looks like a crackhead But he's like the best like hunter I've ever seen, dude. He was walking so slow and so quiet, and he has his gun on the ready constantly because he's gone. I guess he likes to still hunt that logging road a lot because I have a cell camera on it on the scrape where I was sitting, and I've seen him going by, and I always request the video to see his still hunting skills and see if he's ever given up because I watched him after he walked by. And he blew up my, he was walking right where I was watching, so I ended up moving the rest of that day. But I watched him the whole time after he passed me that day, and he was just so slow and so quiet, and he had his gun always like this, always at the ready.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
And he looked like a crackhead.
Yeah, we call him the crackhead ninja. That's what we call him at camp now. Yeah, I'll show you a video of it after we're done. But, yeah. Cool, man. Get one in New Hampshire.
Hopefully. We'll see.
Thanks for coming.
No problem, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for scoring the deer.
Oh, yeah.